Welcome back to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. The general election is coming up on November 4th, and with that in mind, our focus this morning has been on voting. My next guest has been in office as a Milwaukee County Board Supervisor representing District 2 for about a year and a half. He's a Milwaukee native who has had a commitment to the community since his high school days at Riverside High School. And prior to being elected to the county board, he worked as a staffer for the district office of U.S. Representative Gwen Moore. I'm happy to have here today County Supervisor Khalif Rainey. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
So glad to have you here, and we'll get right to it. Several weeks ago, you introduced the resolution to provide free rides to the DMV service locations to help people obtain the much talked about free voter IDs. So the board unanimously passed that measure. So if you would kind of explain to us how that's going to work.
Sure. Well, the intent and the spirit behind the law was simply to remove any unjust due burdens on the public and their constitutionally granted right to vote. And as a county supervisor, I recognize that not only is there a cost factor as far as obtaining a voter ID, which the state has waived, but there's also a transportation factor. Us at the county, we have jurisdiction over our Milwaukee County bus system, so it was my belief that we could utilize this service to help our constituents, our residents, to get to the DMV to obtain the photo ID for voting purposes. So it's been about a week so far since the law has been passed. The county executive has signed off on it, and the Department of Transportation along with the DMV is working together to put together a plan to provide those rides to Milwaukee County residents.
Okay, and so I think it's a great idea because you're right, it's not just an economic thing. It's sometimes people don't have the transportation, and we're talking about whether it's elderly or extremely young people who just maybe don't have the access to transportation. So with that said, it's estimated that some 90,000 people in the county need government issued IDs. I hear people say all the time, well, you should have an ID, and you know, you can't do anything without an ID. Why don't people have an ID? So those people who are without those IDs should not be disenfranchised for whatever reason they don't have one. So you're going to be giving details on how people can obtain these free rides on the Milwaukee County Transit buses to the DMVs coming up soon as those are available.
Absolutely. The public can look forward to receiving some type of notification from Milwaukee County, hearing PSAs, commercials notifying them of exactly how the routes will run and how they will benefit the community. Here in Milwaukee County, as you mentioned, we have about 91,000 people who stand to be impacted by this voter ID law, which is, in my opinion, voter suppression by another name. Here in the state, we have about 300,000 people who stand to be impacted by this voter ID law. The DMV will have to print about 6,000 IDs a day in order to accommodate those residents. So in addition to the confusion that'll be brought upon voters, it'll be brought upon poll workers, and it stands to create bottlenecking and confusion at the polls on election day. So we're fighting back, but we're very concerned about this law.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you have one side that's saying it's disenfranchising, just as you stated, and then you have another side that said, hey, it's ensuring a clean election, no fraud. Why is there so much of a difference in people's way of thinking when it comes to this particular law?
Well, voter ID laws are written on the premise that there's widespread voter fraud in your state. Here in Wisconsin, we had one incident of in-person voter fraud that occurred in 2012, in which a man voted for Scott Walker twice, coincidentally. So there really isn't much evidence to support this law. Here in Milwaukee County, as I mentioned, there's 91,000 people who stand to be impacted. We're 25% African American here in Milwaukee County. We're about 6% Latino. And there's been a study conducted at Washington University that said African Americans stand to be about 180% less likely to have the appropriate documentation to obtain a photo ID. Latinos about 206% less likely to have the proper documentation to receive the ID. So this law stands to actually change the outcome of this election. And if you've been following the polls, it's a very tight election. So if you remove 91,000 voters from Milwaukee County, you stand to change the election, and I'm not sure that's not what they hope to do.
So I did mention early on that you once worked for U.S. Representative Gwen Moore, and she sent a letter to the Government Accountability Board, and she said that this law would disproportionately affect certain vulnerable populations, including seniors, students, African Americans, Hispanics, and other people of color. So it's clear across the board that this is the thought. So with that, on top of you coming up with the resolution to help people have transportation to get to a DMV, the state has launched a $461,000 media campaign, and then I saw you at a press conference where Mayor Tom Barrett, along with some of the Common Council members and Neil Albrecht, everybody was there to kind of launch this social campaign, social media campaign, where people could all be on the same page. Collectively, do you think all these things are going to help before we get to the November 4th election?
I'm hopeful that they'll have an impact. We have about 27 days until the election, so we have to do everything possible. Social media, if you have a Twitter account, a Facebook account, this is an opportunity to show some leadership in our community and put a message out there and encourage friends and family to get to the polls, to get to the DMV, to get the proper identification in order to vote. But this substantially will marginalize and disenfranchise many people from a constitutionally granted right, which is the right to vote.
Now, it's interesting you say the number of days we're away. By the time this airs, we'll be even closer to Election Day. So with all of the things that's been done up to this point, you've done your part as a politician, in my opinion, to take note of the things that are issues for individuals and help and make a change so that they can, in fact, take advantage of it. Is there anything else that you want to add to today's conversation with dealing with this whole concept of voting?
Sure. First I must say, I don't like to be called a politician. I consider myself a servant. Okay. I'm here to serve my community. But I'm excited about a law that I introduced and was passed some time ago where I required that Milwaukee County have their staff equipped to register people to vote. So this benefit is going to kick off within the next week, and you can actually come down to Milwaukee County. If you receive any benefits from Milwaukee County, be it housing, if you're just coming to pay taxes or get a license, there'll be staff in these offices available to register you to vote. So if you need to get registered to vote, you have the opportunity to come to Milwaukee County. You can come to the clerk's office. You can stop in there and get registered.
All right. That's what we like to hear, and I love that. You said you don't consider yourself a politician, a servant it is. Okay. Is there any way that people can follow you and find out more about the things that you're doing within the district that you represent? Is there a website?
Absolutely. I'm not sure the website offhand, but you can contact me via phone. My phone number is 414-278-4278. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm available on Facebook and Instagram. I would love to be of service to you. If there's anything I could do for you, please don't hesitate to contact me.
All righty, and I thank you so much for coming by and sharing all the information with us today. And we'll just remind everybody at home to keep their eyes open, their ears open for the details when it comes to obtaining those free rides to the DMV to obtain their free Wisconsin ID, if in fact they need one. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming by today. County Supervisor Khalif, Rainey, and when we return to our Issues Milwaukee, we're going to find out more about an outstanding organization that is making sure you have every piece of information you need in order to vote on November 4th. You'll find out more about Wisconsin Voices right after this.